The following video was made with the assistance of members of the ASD community, medical professionals, journalists, and healthcare workers.
This isn't going to end well.
Representation in visual media has always been a hot-button issue when it really shouldn't be. Whether we're talking about race, gender, sexuality, or the medical circumstances of actors and the characters they set out to inhabit, film and television have long since relied on a policy of taking without giving, where they water down the stories, cherry-pick the tumultuous drama, and discard anything beyond the thinnest of awards-baiting fluff. 6 years ago, singer, songwriter, and style icon Sia threw her wig into the ring when she announced her intention to write and direct an important, inspirational feature film about the realities of life with autism. The result? After more than half a decade of development, Sia dry-heaved music into existence. An aggressively unpleasant disaster that's more than just a vanity project built on ugly ideas.
Sorry, hold on. Yeah, no, she's fine. She's fine. We got it.
It's emblematic of the entertainment industry's complete unwillingness to understand, engage, or cultivate a meaningful dialogue with the autistic community. First, it's important to acknowledge that this vile joke wasn't born in a vacuum.
This way, music!
Hollywood has seldom paid the autistic community any mind. When they do dip their toe into the neurodivergent world, let's just say there's a whole lot of room for improvement. Damaging, negative, or at the very least unhelpful portrayals of autism spectrum disorder, which from here on out I'll refer to as ASD, tend to forego that really important spectrum distinction, preferring to boil the individualistic, nuanced nature of ASD down to a one-size-fits-all straitjacket of overt signifiers. These restrictive, unrepresentative depictions tend to come in two distinct sizes. First, and most commonly, there's autistic savantism, the socially inept geniuses who struggle with the fundamentals of human connection, but are preternaturally gifted in whatever field keeps the plot ticking along. The Big Bang Theory, The Good Doctor, Rain Man, The Accountant, Mozart and the Whale, Mercury Rising, and The Predator are just a few examples of the gross oversimplification of what is, in reality, an extremely rare byproduct of autism and ASD-adjacent conditions. Now, the camera loves autistic savantism. The Big Bang Theory and The Good Doctor are coded in such a way as to make autistic traits a shorthand for book-smart, socially incapable asshole. Mercury Rising floods its audio track with computer sound effects whenever its code-cracking ASD child thinks. And The Predator takes the craptastic cake when it declares autism as the next step in human evolution, which, taking them at their word, would mean that persons on the spectrum are a different species from neurotypicals, which is, of course, complete trash. Which leads us to the second most common autistic archetype: animalistic, intellectually regressive dependence with no agency, autonomy, or emotional control. Which leads us to this. On a purely nuts and bolts level, music is a skeletal excuse for actors to act, dancers to dance, and Sia to beef up her IMDb page. A young autistic girl named Music, and her older sister Kazuzu, yeah, I know, navigate love, loss, and acceptance in the big city. And it doesn't even take a full minute for Sia to grab her foot and stuff it right in her damn mouth. The film opens with Music's violent self-flagellation and guttural yelps, before flailing straight into a musical number that acts as both a jarring introduction and a horrifying mission statement. If you wanted immediate evidence that this is a film meant to exploit rather than understand autism, look no further than the endless music video digressions that litter this otherwise drab drama. A collage of strobing lights, blaring noise, rapid-fire editing, and luminous colours. As a neurotypical viewer, I found these interludes to be distracting and redundant. For some individuals with ASD, these sequences may directly instigate cases of sensory overload, auditory aversion, and light sensitivity, which in turn could potentially overwhelm or trigger more severe reactions, such as a full-on meltdown. It's a film supposedly for and representative of the autistic community that, given what we're shown of music's place on the spectrum and what we know of ASD, cannot be safely viewed by either its central character or key members of its target audience. So why did Sia include these moments in music when doing so is antithetical to the film's inclusive message? Originally conceived as a straight drama, music was later revised to include these sequences once our upstanding writer-director was told she'd be given an extra $10 million if they incorporated her musical clout into proceedings.
So I turned it into a musical and then we got loads more money.
And if you're thinking, that sounds a lot like Sia sold out the ASD community for a bump to the budget, then you are correct. Integrated as organically as a railroad spike to the frontal lobe, these moments only highlight the dancing, prancing, and mouth-agape disturbing central performance by Maddie Ziegler. Cast in the titular role after Sia, decided that people with ASD either can't act or are too much of a hassle to work with, Ziegler's wildly inappropriate performance is an interpretive dance of ambiguous spasms. In a gurning, garish pantomime of neurodiversity, music narrows down the autistic spectrum to an ungodly rainbow of hyper-quirky caricatures. Music is a misguided impersonation of all the autism, all the time, and all at once. Ziegler only ever offers a crude checklist of tics and gesticulations that, as Theo Bugby wrote in the New York Times, reduces disability to mannerisms that look indistinguishable from mockery.
What are you doing? No. Ew, music, get up.
It's not hard to see what they were going for here. It's hackneyed, played out, my differences are what make me beautiful, on the inside I'm dancing schmaltz, with all the substantive worth of a motivational meme shared by your aunt on Facebook. Yet, music handles its subject with a baby-talking condescension that hobbles its mawkish attempts at empowerment. Early on, we're shown that music lacks the basic ability to comprehend death when her grandmother dies at home, and she just completely ignores the lifeless body. This idea that persons with autism lack fundamental human emotions like grief, empathy, or sadness, it's an age-old ableist insult that barely applies to anyone. Every healthcare professional and member of the ASD community I consulted about this sequence called it grotesque, infantilizing nonsense, especially when considering that elsewhere in this film, music is shown to be more than capable of picking up on social cues. She's also self-sufficient enough to dress, brush her teeth, stroll unsupervised through the city, and eat without assistance. Which adds further credence to the idea that Sia and her collaborators saw autism as an accessory to their rote story, rather than a meaningful or even consistent part of its very foundation. Most dangerously of all, music advocates and encourages the use of prone restraint when dealing with stressed or overwhelmed individuals with ASD.
Okay.
Prone restraint involves a grown adult placing their full body weight onto an agitated child and pinning them down until they stop struggling against it.
You're not hurting her, are you?
No, I am not. I am crushing her with my love.
Sia claims to have researched this film for 3 years before committing to the inclusion of such barbaric ideas. Well, it took me less than 3 minutes to find reams of data from leading health authorities and medical practitioners classifying prone restraint as a form of human rights abuse. It's not just a universally condemned, morally repugnant practice, it's a potentially deadly one. That's just one of the many instances where music, and by extension the autistic community, are dehumanized and robbed of even the faintest shred of dignity. That's because, ultimately, this film never treats music as a living, breathing person. She doesn't have an arc, and at no point does she learn, express any desires, or experience any form of personal development. Rather, her role and the perceived inconvenience of her existence are simply fuel for Kazuzu's journey of growth and her quest to become a more well-rounded person. It's a troubling and all too common trope.
Can't believe I'm related to these people.
In his book Representing Autism, Stuart Murray laments the use of autistic characters as tokenistic devices with which to force flawed protagonists to better function in their neurotypical world. Music completely lacks autonomy, personality, or motivation. She's merely a catalyst for the saccharine blandness of Kazuzu's transformation, just a narrative obstacle that needs to be bested and overcome so the supposedly normal characters can be happy. Beyond its outright incorrect personification of a broadly diverse condition, there's way more here to shake your head at in disbelief. Care worker Ebo is a textbook example of the magical Negro stereotype, wherein a wise person of colour is used as a plot device to teach a white protagonist how to overcome her problems and better herself in the process.
If there is anything I can offer to help you in your time of need, just let me know.
It's also worth noting that this distinctly African character is revealed to have AIDS because Sia was clearly trying to tick off every stigmatizing, culturally insensitive, empathy-inflating trope on her bingo card.
Listen, here's the thing. I don't even care about AIDS. I don't care.
There's a stock Asian character called Felix, who just mulls around in the background of a few scenes, before he's unceremoniously killed off, just so we can see a dead Asian boy riding an old-timey rickshaw to heaven.
Oh no. Oh no, 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 no.
And lest we forget, Sia can't resist popping in for a cameo as herself, where the only joke is that she's a person of enormous wealth and privilege, who can get away with doing absurdly stupid things without repercussions.
I'm gonna buy a shitload of pain meds and put them on my private plane. Meow.
Look, after a few weeks of researching this, and talking with those kind enough to offer their time and expertise, I can't bear to let this wretched waste have the final word. So instead, let's look to some examples of how television and film can and should be better at this. When broaching a dialogue about autism with young children, Julia on Sesame Street offers an appropriate, conscientious insight into ASD.
What's autism?
Well, for Julia, it means that she might not answer you right away.
She does things just a little differently, in a Julia sort of way.
Oh, okay.
There's some iffy stuff about the series' latter-day associations with the controversial group Autism Speaks, but Julia is still an important step towards normalizing autism around kids. An episode of Scrubs titled My Roommate, in which Dr. Cox begins to suspect his friend's infant son may be on the spectrum, sidesteps hyperbole and exaggeration.
Ron, there is no easy way to do this, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think Nathan is autistic.
Instead, placing emphasis on the importance of early diagnosis, parental guidance, and positive reinforcement in a society that so often defaults to a negative mindset when tackling this subject. Harry Connick Jr.'s character in P.S. I Love You may well have ASD, but that isn't the crux of his existence in this tender, underappreciated performance.
What are you doing?
Trying to figure out why God killed my husband.
Well, if you need any help with that, let me know.
Lisbeth Sander in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is an all-too-rare example of a sexually active, deeply flawed and self-sufficient woman on the spectrum. Then there's the overlooked gold standard of neurodivergence as articulated by a neurotypical performer.
Nature is cruel, but we don't have to be.
Temple Grandin is a miraculous and deftly layered portrayal of the titular character that never devolves into parody or over-the-top physicality. Moving beyond these explicitly tailored examples, when I asked those who assisted with the research for this piece what they considered to be positive examples of autistic representation, a recurring pattern emerged. Due to the limited and predominantly negative portrayals found in mainstream entertainment, many of those with ASD have had to seek positive representation wherever they can find it. Abed from Community, the driver from Drive, Tina from Bob's Burgers, Moss in the IT Crowd. While none of these characters are explicitly diagnosed with ASD on screen, there's enough symptomatic shorthand and relatable behaviours within their rich, rewarding characterisation that's led to them being welcomed and positively appropriated by many folks living with autism.
I hadn't thought about it that way.
And none of this is to mention the plethora of incredible content creators on this very platform who also happen to be neurodivergent, and I'll put the links to their stuff in the description below. Music and its egregious ilk continue to suck up all the oxygen in the room when it comes to this discourse. I mean, Christ, just by making this video, I'm giving exposure to a film that I genuinely believe is dangerous. So please, if you take anything away from this, let it be that by offering compassion instead of pity, and researched representation rather than regressive regurgitations, there's no downside.
Especially with the kinds of things that music the character struggles with, you cannot portray that falsely and make it not look like a mockery.
Here's a message from Jay, whose input was invaluable when it came time to write this video. We are not all the same. Some of us need much more help, but are just as human as anyone else. Not just a helpless soul for you to feel sorry for, so you can feel like a better person. Autism is not a monolith. So how about we shut this music off for good, and talk about where to go from here. A shout out to our Patreon producers Jennifer C, Claire MD, Becky O, and Nicholas Lair-Revere, and a massive thanks to all these amazing folks who help support the channel over on Patreon. This video could have in no way existed if it wasn't for the candid insight and overwhelming generosity of all these incredible folks whose words, wisdom, and life experience directly contributed to much of what was discussed here. With a special thanks to the Playing Field Jared and Jamie Clapton for going above and beyond with their assistance. How do you think films and television can be better at this? Make sure to leave a comment below with what you consider the best and worst representations of autism on screen, as well as your thoughts on the controversy surrounding music. There are links to many of our sources, and a number of amazing neurodivergent content creators in the description below, as well as a link to our Patreon, where you can support the channel if you're in a position to do so. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, this is In Frame Out.